My fingers trembled as I opened the pink envelope. Glittery stickers decorated the corners and messy crayon writing filled the inside, but it was the single line in the center that tore straight through my heart. Appa, please come to my 5th birthday. I miss you. Love. Sarah. Appa. That word burned into my soul. I wasn't her father. I was just a substitute teacher, scraping by on private tutoring gigs for the past 4 months. Sarah was a little girl I taught English and drawing to, but her life consisted of only 2 things: colors and loneliness. Her father never showed up for pickup. Not once. Only black-suited drivers with stiff smiles and sealed envelopes stuffed with cash. Today that envelope was in my hands, but it wasn't money. It was a childhood cry for help, desperate and raw. Damn it. I exhaled slowly, my chest tightening. I knew I shouldn't go. This was beyond my responsibilities. I was just a tutor, nothing more. But Sarah's wide eyes when she'd ask, "Will you stay longer today?" Those moments never left my mind. They haunted me in the quiet hours of the night when I tried to convince myself I was just doing a job. I thought about ignoring it, maybe not even responding. But the next morning when I saw the card again on my coffee table, there was another note attached to it. The handwriting was completely different. Strong, sharp, corporate precision. If you care about her at all, show up. 3 p.m. Rosemont Estate, M. Calloway, N. Calloway. Milton Calloway, CEO of Calloway Industries. Sarah's biological father, the man whose wife had abandoned them both when Sarah was barely 2 years old, leaving him to raise a daughter alone while running a billion-dollar empire. My hands started shaking again. This man was a legend in business circles. Ruthless, brilliant, untouchable, and now he was summoning me. Why? My heart pounded violently against my ribcage. I stood up from my chair, then froze. If I went, what would happen? If I didn't go, what about Sarah? Her small face flashed in my mind. She always said, "You're the only one who listens to me." I grabbed the card again, my breath catching in my throat. Fine. I'll go. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a birthday party. Something bigger was waiting for me behind those gates. When I arrived at Rosemont Estate, standing before the towering golden gates, I realized my instincts had been right. Because behind those gates stood the man himself, tall, imposing, wrapped in a perfectly tailored suit like a weapon. Milton Calloway, and his gaze was locked directly on me. All my confidence evaporated instantly. "You actually came," he said, his voice low and carefully controlled. "I came for Sarah," I replied, forcing my voice to sound steady. His jaw tightened visibly. "Good. Because you're the only person she's asked for in 3 years." The weight of those words hit me like a truck. 3 years. This little girl had been asking for anyone to see her. And apparently I was the first person who'd actually shown up. "Mr. Calloway, I didn't realize—" "Milton," he interrupted curtly. "And save the formalities. You're here now. That's what matters." He turned without another word and walked toward the mansion entrance. I followed, my legs feeling heavier with each step. The estate was enormous. Manicured gardens stretched endlessly, fountains sparkled under the afternoon sun, and the mansion itself looked like something out of an architectural magazine. But as we approached the front doors, I noticed something unsettling. Despite all the grandeur, despite all the wealth on display, everything felt cold, lifeless, like a beautiful painting with no soul behind it. Milton pushed open the heavy oak doors, and we entered a foyer that took my breath away for all the wrong reasons. Crystal chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting. Staff members stood at attention along the walls like silent sentinels. Yet the silence was deafening. No laughter, no warmth, no signs of a child living here at all. "Sarah is upstairs in the playroom," Milton said without looking at me. His tone was clipped, professional, like he was briefing a business associate rather than speaking to his daughter's teacher. "Aren't you coming up?" I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. He stopped mid-stride, turned slightly, and for the first time I saw something else in his slate-gray eyes: exhaustion that went bone-deep, pain that had settled permanently, and guilt that seemed to suffocate him from within. "She doesn't want me there," he said quietly, almost to himself. Something twisted painfully in my chest. This man, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, stood separated from his own daughter because he didn't know how to bridge the gap between them. When Sarah's mother had left, Milton had shut himself down emotionally. The pressure of being a single father, managing a corporate empire, and trying to understand a child he couldn't connect with it had all become too much. "Mr. Calloway," "Milton," he corrected sharply. "And don't lecture me. I already know I'm failing as a father." My words caught in my throat. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the brokenness in his eyes stopped me cold. "I'm not here to judge you," I said softly, carefully. "But if you really care about her, then come upstairs. Just stand there, let her see you trying." Milton's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle ticking beneath his skin. He said nothing for a long moment, but I could see the war raging inside him. Fear versus love. Pride versus desperation. "Go ahead," he finally managed, his voice strained. I'll come up later." It was a hollow promise. I knew it. He knew it, but I nodded anyway and headed toward the grand staircase. As I climbed the steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something far more complicated than a simple birthday party. This wasn't just about teaching a child or helping a struggling father. This was about a family fracturing at the seams, held together by nothing but titles and obligation. When I reached the top of the stairs, I paused outside the playroom door. I could hear soft humming from inside Sarah's voice, sweet and innocent, filling the silence with her own invented melody. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and pushed open the door. Whatever happened next, whatever I was walking into, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The moment I stepped into the playroom, Sarah's entire face transformed. Her eyes, those impossibly large brown eyes that always seemed too sad for a child, lit up with pure joy. "Appa," she screamed, dropping the crayon she'd been holding and racing across the room toward me. My heart slammed against my chest. I caught her as she launched herself into my arms. She was so light, so fragile, like holding something precious that might break if I wasn't careful enough. "Happy birthday, Sarah," I said, managing a smile despite the ache spreading through my chest. "You came. I knew you'd come." Her eyes sparkled with genuine happiness, and for a moment the loneliness that usually shadowed her face disappeared completely. But then she looked past me toward the empty doorway. Her smile faltered slightly, dimming like a candle caught in a draft. "Is Papa here?" My throat went dry. What could I possibly say? That her father was terrified of disappointing her? That he considered himself so broken he was afraid to even try? "He's dealing with some things right now, sweetheart. But he wanted me to tell you he's thinking about you," I said, hating myself for the half-truth. Sarah's face fell, and I watched her childhood innocence crack just a little bit more. "He's always dealing with things." I knelt down to her level, placing my hands gently on her small shoulders. "I know, but today, let's focus on making this the best birthday ever. Just you and me. Deal?" She managed a weak smile and nodded. "Deal." We spent the next hour immersed in her world. She showed me every drawing she'd made since our last session, pages and pages of colorful scenes depicting families holding hands, houses with smoking chimneys, gardens full of flowers. Every picture told the same story: a child dreaming of something she didn't have. "This one's my favorite," Sarah said, holding up a drawing of 3 figures standing together under a rainbow. "That's Papa. That's you, and that's me. We're all together." My vision blurred slightly. "It's beautiful, Sarah. Truly beautiful. Do you think Papa would like it?" "I think he'd love it." She carefully set it aside, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers what I look like. He leaves before I wake up and comes home after I'm asleep. The nannies tuck me in. The drivers take me to school. Everyone here works for him, but nobody—" She trailed off, her bottom lip trembling. "Nobody what, sweetheart?" "Nobody stays because they want to. Except you." Those words shattered something inside me. I pulled her into a hug, holding her close while she clung to my shirt like I was the only solid thing in her shifting world. "I'm here because I want to be here, Sarah. Always remember that." Just then, the door creaked open. Milton stood in the doorway, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his entire posture radiating discomfort. He looked like a man about to face execution rather than his own daughter's birthday celebration. Sarah went completely still in my arms. "Papa?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, disbelief and hope mixing together in equal measure. Milton took slow, measured steps into the room. His face remained carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed everything: fear, regret, longing, and a desperate need for something he didn't know how to ask for. "Happy birthday, Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible. For a moment nobody moved. The tension in the room was suffocating, thick enough to choke on. Then, like ice beginning to thaw, Sarah slowly released her grip on me and took a tentative step toward her father. Milton looked absolutely terrified. He clearly had no idea what to do with his hands, how to stand, where to look. Everything about him screamed discomfort and uncertainty. But then Sarah took another step, and another, until she was standing right in front of him, looking up with those enormous eyes that held galaxies of unspoken questions. "You came," she whispered. "I came," Milton confirmed, his voice cracking on the second word. And then, miracle of miracles, Sarah reached up and Milton bent down and they embraced. It was awkward and stiff, neither of them quite sure how to hold the other. But it was real, it was something. Tears burned behind my eyes. I turned away slightly, giving them privacy for this fragile moment of reconnection. "I'm sorry I'm not better at this," Milton murmured into Sarah's hair. "I'm sorry I don't know how to be what you need. You just have to be here, Papa. That's all. Just be here." The simplicity of her request, the heartbreaking ease of it, made my chest constrict painfully. This little girl wasn't asking for the moon. She was asking for presence, for attention, for her father to exist in the same space as her for more than 5 rushed minutes between business calls. Milton pulled back slightly, looking at his daughter as if seeing her properly for the first time in years. "I'll try. I promise I'll try." "Okay," Sarah said. And though her voice was small, it carried the weight of cautious hope. We spent the rest of the afternoon together. The three of us. Milton was clearly out of his element, fumbling through party games and stumbling over small talk. But he stayed. That was what mattered. He stayed. When it came time to cut the cake, the elaborate 3-tiered creation decorated with unicorns and rainbows, Sarah insisted both Milton and I help her with the knife. We stood on either side of her, our hands covering hers, guiding the blade through buttercream and sponge. "Make a wish, sweetheart," I reminded her gently. Sarah closed her eyes tight, her face scrunched in concentration. After a moment she opened them again and smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "What did you wish for?" Milton asked. "If I tell you, it won't come true," Sarah said seriously. "But maybe it already is coming true. A little bit." She looked between us and I realized what she'd wished for. It was standing right in front of her, both of us, together. Making an effort. Building something that resembled a family, even if it was fragile and uncertain. As guests began arriving, mostly children from Sarah's preschool and their parents, Milton retreated slightly, overwhelmed by the noise and chaos. I found him standing near the window, watching his daughter laugh and play with other kids. "She's happy," I observed, coming to stand beside him. "Because you're here," Milton replied without looking at me. "No, because you showed up. You have no idea how much that means to her." He finally turned to face me, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly knocked me off balance. "I don't know how to do this. Any of this. Being a father, connecting with her, making her feel loved. Her mother left because I was always working, always prioritizing the company, and now I've done the same thing to Sarah. I've repeated every mistake." "Then stop repeating them," I said simply. "It's not too late. She's 5 years old, Milton. You have time to fix this." "Do I?" His question hung heavy between us. "Or have I already broken something that can't be repaired?" "Kids are resilient. And Sarah loves you. I see it every time she talks about you. Every time she draws pictures with you in them. She just needs you to love her back loudly enough for her to feel it." Milton's jaw worked silently for a moment before he managed, "Will you help me? Teach me how to reach her?" The request caught me completely off guard. "I'm just a tutor." "You're more than that. You're the only person who's gotten through to her in years. Please. I'm asking for help." The desperation in his voice, The raw honesty made it impossible to refuse. Against every logical instinct screaming at me to walk away from this complicated situation, I heard myself say, "Okay, I'll help." Relief washed over Milton's features so powerfully that he actually sagged slightly against the window frame. "Thank you. Truly." As the party continued around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just agreed to something far more significant than teaching lessons. I'd stepped into the center of a broken family's attempt to rebuild itself, and somehow I knew there was no backing out now. The party wound down as evening approached. Balloons gradually deflated in corners, cake sat half-eaten on the dessert table, and Sarah had finally exhausted herself into sleep upstairs in her bedroom, worn out but genuinely peaceful for the first time I'd seen. I was gathering my things, preparing to leave, when Milton's voice stopped me. "Wait." The single word carried so much weight that I froze mid-motion, my jacket half on. He walked toward the living room without explanation, and I followed uncertainly. The room was different from the rest of the house. Darker, more intimate, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furniture that actually looked used rather than decorative. Milton went straight to a cabinet and pulled out a crystal decanter of what looked like expensive whiskey. He poured 2 glasses without asking if I wanted one, then held one out toward me. "Drink?" His tone made it less of a question and more of an invitation into something heavier than small talk. "I don't usually drink much," I admitted hesitantly. "Neither do I. But tonight feels like an exception." I accepted the glass. We stood there in loaded silence, the amber liquid catching the lamplight between us. "Thank you," Milton finally said, his voice rougher than before. "For what?" "For showing up today. For being there for Sarah when I couldn't figure out how." His voice fractured slightly on the last words. "For doing what I should have been doing all along." My chest felt heavy. "Milton, you're her father. She loves you. She's always loved you." "Does she?" His gray eyes finally lifted to meet mine, and I saw the depth of his self-doubt. "Because every single time I try to connect with her, I mess it up. I don't know what to say. I don't understand what she needs from me." When her mother walked out, when she looked at me and said she couldn't do this anymore, that she needed more than I could give, I shut down, completely, and I've been drowning ever since. Trying to run a company while raising a daughter alone, failing at both. For the first time I was seeing the real Milton Calloway, not the polished CEO or the distant father, but a man who'd been treading water for 3 years and finally admitting he was tired of fighting the current. "You showed up today," I said carefully. "That's the first step. That's everything to her." Milton took a long drink from his glass, his throat working as he swallowed. "Sarah calls you Appa. Do you understand the significance of that?" My mouth went dry. "I never encouraged it. She just started." "I'm not accusing you of anything." His tone softened marginally. "I'm envious. My own daughter calls another man father because that person has given her what I can't seem to provide. Presence, attention, care. The things that should be fundamental but somehow became impossible for me." The silence that followed was suffocating. I had no idea how to respond to such raw honesty. Then Milton set down his glass with deliberate precision and looked directly at me. "Stay." My heart stopped. "What?" "Stay here. Live-in tutor, nanny, child specialist, whatever title you want. I'll triple your current rate, provide full accommodations, benefits beyond anything you're making now." Sarah needs consistency. She needs someone who actually understands her. My mind reeled. "Milton, I'm just a substitute teacher making ends meet. This would. You're more than that to her." He cut me off, his intensity building. "And perhaps," he paused, seeming to struggle with whatever came next, "perhaps you could teach me as well. Show me how to be the father she deserves instead of the failure I've become." His eyes held mine with an intensity that made breathing difficult. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a desperate man extending a lifeline, hoping someone would help him learn how to save his own drowning relationship with his daughter. "I need time to process this," I managed, my voice barely steady. "Take whatever time you need." His jaw clenched. "But please don't vanish. Sarah has already lost too many people. Her mother abandoned her. Every nanny we've hired has eventually left for better positions. Everyone treats this house like a stepping stone to something else. I can't." His voice cracked completely. I can't watch her lose someone else she's attached to. The vulnerability in that confession hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about business anymore. This was about a father terrified of watching his daughter suffer another abandonment. After Milton left the room, I stood there holding my untouched whiskey glass, staring at nothing. Stay? Move into this mansion? Become part of their fractured daily life? This wasn't just employment. This was walking directly into an emotional minefield with no clear path through. Sarah would attach to me even more strongly. Milton would depend on me to bridge the gap he couldn't cross himself, and I would be inserting myself into a family dynamic I had no business being part of. But then I remembered Sarah's face when she'd seen her father at her party. The pure, unfiltered joy. The hope that had bloomed in her eyes when both of us stood beside her cutting cake. The way she'd drawn that picture of 3 people holding hands under a rainbow. I set the glass down on a side table and walked to the window overlooking the estate grounds. Moonlight painted everything in silver and shadow, making the perfect gardens look almost ethereal. What was I really walking away from? A cramped apartment with inconsistent tutoring gigs, living paycheck to paycheck while trying to convince myself I was making a difference in children's lives through an hour-long session twice a week. And what would I be walking toward? A chance to genuinely impact a child who desperately needed someone stable. An opportunity to help a father reconnect with his daughter before their relationship disintegrated completely beyond repair. The logical part of my brain screamed warnings. Getting emotionally involved with clients was unprofessional. Living with them blurred every conceivable boundary. The situation had disaster written all over it. But another part of me, the part that had become a teacher specifically to help kids who were struggling, couldn't ignore what I'd seen today. Sarah lighting up at her father's presence. Milton trying despite his obvious terror. The fragile beginning of something that could potentially heal if given the right support. I pulled out my phone and stared at Milton's contact information. My thumb hovered over the call button for what felt like an eternity. Then I thought about Sarah asking if I'd stay longer. Her small hand in mine. That drawing of 3 figures under a rainbow. The wish she wouldn't tell us but that we both understood perfectly. Maybe some risks were worth taking. Maybe walking into complicated situations was exactly what being a teacher meant. Not just instructing from a safe distance, but diving into the messy reality of children's lives and helping however possible. I pressed call before I could overthink it further. Milton answered on the first ring, his voice tight with tension. "Hello? I'll do it," I said, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "I'll stay. But we need to establish clear boundaries and expectations. This has to be about Sarah first. Always. If at any point this arrangement stops being beneficial for her, I'm out. Understood?" A long exhale came through the phone, relief so profound I could practically feel it. "Understood. Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "I think I'm beginning to," I replied quietly. After we hung up, I stood there in the dark living room for several more minutes, processing the magnitude of what I'd just committed to. I just agreed to move into a mansion, live with a broken family and somehow help piece them back together. No pressure at all. But as I finally headed toward the front door, I caught sight of that drawing Sarah had made, still sitting where she'd carefully placed it, 3 figures holding hands under an impossible rainbow. Maybe impossible things happen sometimes. Maybe families could be rebuilt from fragments. Maybe I could actually make a difference here. Or maybe I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Either way, there was no turning back now. 3 days later, I returned to Rosemont Estate with everything I owned crammed into 2 suitcases and 3 boxes of books. My entire life, reduced to a carload of belongings that would now occupy a guest wing larger than my previous apartment. Milton personally helped me settle in, which surprised me. I'd expected staff to handle everything, but he insisted on carrying boxes himself, his corporate armor slightly dented by the casual intimacy of the task. "The guest wing has its own bathroom and sitting area," he explained, his tone professional yet somehow softer than during our first encounter. "You'll have complete privacy. Sarah's room is down the main hall. Mine is in the east wing. If you need anything, I'll figure it out," I assured him, noticing how his gaze kept landing on me and then darting away, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the words. Our conversation was interrupted by a delighted shriek from the doorway. "You're staying forever?" Sarah burst into the room, her entire face glowing with excitement. "For now, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to her level and smiling despite the uncertainty churning in my stomach. "Forever starts with for now, Appa." She laughed, throwing her arms around my neck with such force I nearly toppled backward. My heart melted completely. Milton watched us from across the room, something unreadable flickering across his features. Perhaps longing, perhaps regret, perhaps hope that this arrangement might actually work. The first week unfolded with surprising ease. My days developed a rhythm: breakfast with Sarah, morning lessons covering reading and mathematics, afternoon art sessions where she'd create masterpieces from finger paints and construction paper, evening stories before bed. She thrived on the consistency, her laughter becoming more frequent, her nightmares less common. Milton remained mostly a shadow during those initial days, leaving before dawn, returning after Sarah's bedtime. But gradually something shifted. He started appearing at dinner, sitting at the head of the long mahogany table while Sarah chattered about her day between bites of carefully prepared meals. The conversations were awkward at first. Forced small talk about weather and schedules. Uncomfortable silences filled with clinking silverware. But he was trying, and that effort mattered more than eloquence. One evening, as we finished dessert, Sarah looked between us with sudden inspiration sparkling in her eyes. "Appa, can you teach Papa how to draw too?" Milton choked slightly on his water, coughing into his napkin while I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. "I don't think your papa has time for—" I began diplomatically. "I have time," Milton interrupted, his voice carrying unexpected firmness. "If you're willing to teach me." My pulse quickened. "Tomorrow night? After Sarah goes to sleep?" He nodded once. Decisive. Tomorrow night. The following evening, after tucking Sarah in and reading her favorite story about a dragon who befriended a knight, I found Milton waiting in the dining room. He'd cleared the table himself and laid out sketchbooks, pencils, erasers, supplies that looked newly purchased. "I'm terrible at drawing," he admitted immediately, a hint of embarrassment coloring his usual controlled tone. "Fair warning. Everyone starts somewhere," I replied, pulling out a chair beside him instead of across from him. Proximity felt necessary for proper instruction, though my racing heart suggested other reasons for choosing that seat. I started with fundamentals: how to hold the pencil loosely, how to see shapes within objects, how to build dimension through shading. Milton approached it like a business problem, his movements stiff and mechanical, each line drawn with boardroom precision. "Relax," I said gently, reaching over to place my hand atop his, guiding the pencil in fluid motions across the paper. "Art isn't about control, it's about feeling." The moment my hand touched his, Milton went completely still. His breathing stopped, his entire body tensing as if I'd touched a live wire. "Sorry," I started to pull away. "Don't." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "It's fine. This is fine." But something had shifted in the air between us. Something heavy and unspoken that made the space feel smaller, more charged, impossible to ignore. We continued the lesson in loaded silence, my hand occasionally guiding his, each point of contact sending electricity up my arm. When he finally completed a decent sketch of a coffee cup, his face broke into the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "Not terrible," I observed, matching his smile. "High praise from a professional educator," he replied, and there was warmth in his tone that hadn't existed before. "Why did you agree to stay?" The question came suddenly, catching me off guard with its directness. "For Sarah," I answered automatically. "Only for her?" His gray eyes held mine with unsettling intensity, searching for something beneath my surface answer. My breath caught in my throat. "I wanted to help," I managed, knowing it was inadequate but unable to articulate the complicated truth that somewhere in the past weeks, this broken family had started feeling like something I wanted to be part of. Not just professionally but personally. Milton leaned back in his chair, studying me. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I'm trying to understand you, understand why someone would willingly walk into this mess. Why does it matter? Because you've accomplished in weeks what I couldn't achieve in years." His voice cracked slightly. "You made her smile again. You made this house feel like a home instead of a mausoleum." Pain lanced through my chest. Milton, you're her father. She loves you. You just need to stop judging yourself so harshly. He opened his mouth to respond, but Sarah's frightened voice cut through the moment. Appa, nightmare. We both bolted from our chairs, racing upstairs to find Sarah sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face, small hands clutching her blanket like a lifeline. I reached her first, gathering her into my arms while she sobbed against my shoulder. Milton appeared seconds later, hovering uncertainly at the bedside until I gestured for him to sit. It's okay, baby. We're here, Milton whispered, his hand tentatively reaching out to stroke her hair. That word reverberated through me with unexpected force. Not I'm here, but we're here. A unit. A team. Something that resembled family. We stayed with her until she drifted back to sleep, her breathing evening out, her grip on both of us gradually loosening. When we finally crept out of her room, closing the door softly behind us, Milton turned to me in the dimly lit hallway. Thank you, he said quietly, for being here, for us. Us. That word echoed in my mind long after I'd returned to my room, lying awake in the darkness, replaying the evening's events, the touch of his hand beneath mine, the vulnerability in his eyes, the way us had sounded so natural falling from his lips. I'd agreed to come here for Sarah, to help a struggling child and her distant father reconnect. Simple, professional, bounded. But boundaries were blurring faster than I'd anticipated, and I wasn't sure whether to be terrified or exhilarated by that realization. Through the walls I could hear the old house settling, creaking softly as night deepened. Somewhere down the hall, Sarah slept peacefully, protected by the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. And somewhere in the East Wing, Milton was probably lying awake too, wondering what he'd gotten himself into by inviting a stranger to live in his home and teach him how to be human again. We were all walking a tightrope together now, balanced precariously between the family we'd been and the family we might become. One wrong step could send everything crashing down. But for tonight, with Sarah sleeping soundly and the ghost of Milton's touch still warm on my hand, falling didn't seem quite so frightening anymore. A month dissolved into routine, and with routine came unexpected transformations. Milton began arriving home earlier, joining us for dinner more consistently. His smiles came more easily. He'd crouch beside Sarah during her drawing sessions, attempting his own stick figure contributions that made her giggle. The rigid CEO started melting into something softer, more present, more real. Our late-night drawing lessons continued, evolving into conversations that stretched past midnight. We talked about everything: his childhood spent trying to earn his father's approval, my decision to become a teacher despite pressure to pursue more lucrative careers, Sarah's development and how to navigate her emotional needs. Real conversations, stripped of pretense and polite distance. But everything shifted one particular night. I was in the library, lost in a novel, when Milton entered. His appearance startled me. Tie hanging loose and askew, shirt sleeves rolled up messily, hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. Stress radiated from him in visible waves. Bad day? I asked, setting my book aside. Catastrophic. He moved directly to the liquor cabinet, pouring amber liquid into a tumbler with shaking hands. The board meeting was a disaster. Major investors are pulling out. Everything I've built is threatening to collapse, and I'm completely losing control. I'd never seen him this unguarded, this close to breaking completely. The polished corporate facade had shattered, revealing raw vulnerability beneath. Do you want to talk about it? Milton hesitated, glass halfway to his lips, then seemed to make a decision. He crossed the room and sank into the chair beside mine. Not across, but beside, close enough that our knees almost touched. And then he opened up. Everything poured out in a torrent. The crushing pressure of maintaining the company his father built. The constant fear of failing Sarah the way he believed he'd failed her mother. The suffocating loneliness of being simultaneously surrounded by people yet feeling utterly isolated. The terror of never being enough for anyone or anything. I constructed an empire, he said bitterly, staring into his glass like it held answers. Built something that employs thousands, impacts markets, generates wealth beyond measure. But I couldn't construct a relationship with my daughter. When Sarah's mother left, she told me I was only capable of loving my work. She was right. I've proven her right every single day since. You're building it now, I countered gently. Slowly, imperfectly, but it's happening. Sarah sees the efforts. That matters more than perfection. Only because you're here. His eyes locked onto mine with startling intensity. You've changed everything. Changed her, changed this house. Changed me. My heart skipped several beats. I just provided support. No. He leaned closer, eliminating more space between us. You saved us. You walked into our disaster and somehow made it bearable. Made it better. You gave me hope that maybe I haven't completely destroyed everything. The air grew thick, charged with something dangerous and electric. Our faces were close enough that I could count the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. See the faint stubble along his jaw, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Milton. His name came out shakier than intended. Tell me to stop, he whispered, his breath ghosting across my face. Tell me this crosses a line. Tell me I'm being inappropriate and you're only here for Sarah. But I couldn't form those words. Couldn't lie when the truth was burning through my veins. That somewhere between teaching him to draw and watching him learn to be a father, I'd started caring about him as more than just my employer or Sarah's distant parent. Milton's hand lifted slowly, trembling slightly as his fingers brushed my cheek with devastating gentleness. I don't know when it happened, he murmured, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. Somewhere between you teaching me about shading and saving my daughter from nightmares, I started needing you, not just for Sarah, for me. My breath caught completely. This complicates everything. I know. Sarah has to come first. Always. She will. She does. He paused, conflict warring across his features. But am I not allowed to want something for myself? After years of denying every personal need, every human connection, can't I want this? Want you? The naked longing in his voice shattered my remaining defenses. I stopped thinking about professionalism, about boundaries, about consequences. I stopped thinking entirely and just felt. I closed the distance between us and kissed him. Soft, tentative, terrified of what I was unleashing but unable to stop myself. Milton responded immediately, his hand sliding from my cheek to cup the back of my head, pulling me closer. His lips moved against mine with desperate gentleness, like he'd been starving for human connection and finally found sustenance. The kiss deepened gradually, building from tentative to certain, from questioning to answering. When we finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Milton rested his forehead against mine. Our breathing mingled in the small space between us. This changes everything, I whispered, reality crashing back. I know. His eyes remained closed, as if opening them might make this moment disappear. But I don't care anymore. I've spent 3 years being careful, being controlled, being appropriate, and I'm exhausted. I don't want to be careful with you. What are we doing? The question was rhetorical. Neither of us had answers. Something reckless, Milton admitted. Something probably inadvisable. Something that feels more right than anything has in years. We sat there for a long time, foreheads still pressed together, hands intertwined, neither willing to move and break the fragile spell. Outside the library windows, moonlight painted silver patterns across the floor. The house settled around us with familiar creaks and sighs. Somewhere upstairs, Sarah slept peacefully, unaware that the foundation of her newly stable world had just shifted dramatically. We'll figure this out, Milton said finally, though his tone suggested he wasn't certain we actually would. Whatever this becomes, we'll navigate it. Together. Together. Another loaded word that carried implications neither of us was ready to fully examine. We should get some sleep, I said reluctantly, though sleep seemed impossible now. Milton nodded but didn't release my hand. Tomorrow morning will be awkward. Probably catastrophically awkward. A surprised laugh escaped him, genuine and unguarded. Worth it though. Yeah, I agreed softly. Worth it. When we finally separated and headed to our respective rooms, I felt the weight of what we'd started settling onto my shoulders. This wasn't a simple attraction or a fleeting moment of weakness. This was something with the potential to either heal everyone involved or cause irreparable damage. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I replayed the kiss over and over, remembering the taste of whiskey on his lips, the desperate gentleness of his touch, The way he'd looked at me like I was something precious and necessary. Tomorrow would bring complications. Questions. Uncertainty about how to proceed without hurting Sarah or compromising the progress we'd made as a fragile family unit. But tonight, for just a few more hours before dawn forced us back into reality, I let myself feel the warmth of being wanted, of wanting someone in return, of the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could make this impossible situation work. Morning arrived with awkwardness, but not the uncomfortable kind. Instead, it was sweet and tentative, like we were both navigating brand new territory and trying not to stumble. Milton's eyes found mine across the breakfast table, and a small smile tugged at his lips before he quickly looked away. My heart fluttered stupidly. Sarah, thankfully, noticed nothing unusual. She was too delighted by the fact that both her Appa and Papa were making breakfast together, working side by side at the stove with surprising coordination. "Are you guys friends now?" Sarah asked innocently, swinging her legs from her chair while watching us flip pancakes. Milton and I exchanged a glance loaded with everything we couldn't say. "Yeah," Milton answered softly, his voice carrying warmth I'd rarely heard. "Best friends." Sarah clapped her hands enthusiastically. "Finally, I've been waiting forever." We both laughed, and in that moment everything felt perfectly right despite being objectively complicated. The following weeks unfolded like a dream I was afraid to wake from. We kept our relationship hidden, not out of shame but out of protection for Sarah's still fragile sense of security. During the day, we maintained appropriate boundaries, but at night, after Sarah drifted to sleep, Milton would appear at my door or I'd find him in the library and we'd talk for hours, occasionally stealing kisses that felt both forbidden and inevitable. We learned each other slowly. I discovered that Milton was ticklish just below his ribs, that he made terrible jokes when nervous, that he'd memorized poetry in college and could still recite entire Frost poems from memory. He learned that I was afraid of spiders but faced them anyway, that I'd wanted to be a teacher since age 7 when my own teacher had believed in me when no one else did, that I hummed unconsciously when concentrating. The intimacy built gradually, not rushed, not purely physical but emotional connection deepening with each shared secret and vulnerable moment. Then everything crystallized one afternoon when Sarah got sick. It started with a slight fever that spiked rapidly. By evening she was burning up, lethargic, barely responsive. Panic seized us both. Milton called his private physician immediately, but the hour it took for the doctor to arrive felt endless. I'd never seen Milton so terrified. He paced the bedroom like a caged animal, his composure completely shattered. "I can't lose her," he kept repeating, voice breaking on each repetition. "I can't. She's everything. If something happens to her..." I caught his hand, gripping tightly. "You won't lose her. She's strong. She inherited that from you." His eyes met mine, desperate for reassurance I wasn't sure I could provide. But I held his gaze steadily until his breathing slowed slightly. The doctor confirmed it was just a severe viral flu, frightening but not dangerous. Fever reducers, rest, and monitoring. Sarah would recover fully within days. The relief nearly buckled Milton's knees. He sank into the chair beside Sarah's bed, dropping his head into his hands while his shoulders shook silently. Over the next 48 hours, we didn't leave her side. We took shifts monitoring her temperature, coaxing her to drink water and eat bland soup, reading stories when she was awake enough to listen, simply sitting vigil when she slept. The crisis stripped away every pretense and barrier between us. We were just two people desperately caring for a child we both loved. On the third day, when Sarah's fever finally broke and color returned to her cheeks, she looked at us with clear eyes for the first time in days. "You both love me so much," she whispered, voice still weak but carrying wonder. "More than anything in this world," Milton said, his voice thick with emotion. Then, Sarah's gaze moved between us thoughtfully. "Can we be a real family? The three of us? Not just pretending or practicing, but actually real." Milton's eyes found mine across Sarah's bed, and I saw everything reflected there. Hope warring with fear, desire colliding with caution, love struggling against the weight of potential consequences. "We already are, sweetheart," I said, smiling despite tears blurring my vision. "We've been a real family for a while now." Sarah's face lit up with pure joy. "Good. Because I don't want Appa to ever leave. Ever, ever. I'm not going anywhere, I promised, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Milton's hand found mine beneath Sarah's blanket, our fingers interlacing and holding tight. Months flowed past like water, each day settling into beautiful routine. Sarah flourished, her confidence blooming, her nightmares becoming rare, her laughter filling rooms that had been silent too long. Milton transformed from the distant CEO into a present father who attended tea parties, helped with homework, read bedtime stories with silly voices that made Sarah giggle uncontrollably. And we, Milton and I, we built something neither of us had expected. Not perfect, not traditional, but undeniably real. One evening after Sarah had gone to bed, Milton approached me with nervous energy radiating from his usually controlled demeanor. "Move into my room," he said without preamble. "Milton, not for anything inappropriate," he rushed to clarify. "I just don't want to wake up alone anymore. I want to know you're there. I want to fall asleep beside you and wake up with you beside me. Just that. Just presence." My heart said yes before my brain could raise objections. So I moved my things from the guest wing to the master bedroom in the east wing, and it felt like coming home. When Sarah discovered us together the next morning, both emerging from the same room, she simply smiled. "Is Appa staying forever now, Papa?" she asked, zero judgment in her innocent question. Milton looked at me, vulnerability and hope naked on his face. "If he wants to." "I do," I said without hesitation, without doubt. "I want forever with both of you." Sarah launched herself at us, wrapping her arms around both our legs simultaneously. Best family ever. And she was right. We were messy and imperfect and unconventional. We didn't fit society's neat definitions of what family should look like. We'd started as broken pieces, a grieving widowed father, a lonely child, a directionless teacher, and somehow assembled ourselves into something whole. Because family isn't always born from blood. Sometimes it's built from choice. From showing up. From staying when leaving would be easier. From loving imperfect people perfectly. I'd walked into this mansion expecting temporary employment. Instead, I found home. Found belonging. Found love in its purest, most complicated, most beautiful form. Milton pulled me close while Sarah chattered excitedly about breakfast plans. His lips brushed my temple softly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saving us. For staying. For choosing this impossible family. Thank you for letting me," I whispered back. "For trusting me with both of you. For being brave enough to try." Sarah grabbed both our hands, pulling us toward the kitchen with 6-year-old determination. And as we followed her, this little girl who'd brought us together with a pink invitation and a desperate wish, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. Forever had started with for now, but now had become always. And always was going to be extraordinary,